Guys, I guess this is the first video recording I'm actually doing, so if there is any glitches, anything that is wrong, I beg Mona pity me. Everybody they learn every day, but I guess today's own will be better. So like I told you guys, this week is just going to be projects on JavaScript, so that I can use that to actually show you guys some things that we can do on JavaScript, where we just they talk about theory since may know they like seeing theory where they do. We get to work on some projects, some cool projects with JavaScript. I guess before the end of this week to also get to even build a game, actually some games. Just the research about some games where we go few build with them. Just they go through the stores and all that. But let's start from the simple ones, then we migrate to the harder ones. So for this first video that we are doing, we are going to build a stopwatch application, and also a we're also going to build a digital watch application. So I'll just go ahead and show you guys the final design that we are going to work on by the end of this stopwatch application. So this is how the stopwatch is going to look like. I guess I built this together with Prince and Raphael today in the class. Then we just get to hit the start button and you get your stopwatch to start. You click on stop, which stops it. You can also click on start to continue where you want to continue, or you can click on reset, which resets your stopwatch application. So now I'm just going to walk you guys through the code base. So basically we have our HTML file, and inside our HTML file, the first thing I'll need to talk about is the linking of our CSS. So don't you guys, this is important to have to link your CSS files if you want to make use of an external file, and also where we linked our JavaScript file at the end of the document. Then finally we just have a h1. Okay, we have a div that is we are using to center our document, and also we have the h1 which just shows a stopwatch on the screen with a bigger text, the h3 which is just a little bit smaller, and I have this p tag. So this p tag is made up of three span HTML tags. The first span HTML tag starts with just 00. So when you look at this, we have this 00 for the hour time. So that is what I mean for the minutes time. Then after that we have this colon which comes after that. Then we have the seconds, which is also 00, and we have the tenths. So the tenths is just this last stuff that most people do miss out in time. Actually till now I'm still yet to find out what they call these guys, but I know it counts from 1 to 100 before you get to increase your second timer. Then finally we have the three buttons, which is the start, stop, and reset. So if you notice too, I have IDs, unique ID given to the minutes time, the seconds time, the tenths time, and also for our start, stop, and reset button, I gave them unique IDs. So the next thing I would like to talk about is the CSS file. So for the CSS file, we have the background orange, which I just gave to the full body document. I have the dot content, which I gave the width of 800 pixel, a margin of 30 pixel from the top and the bottom, and auto for the left and right, which actually centers our design. Then text align center makes every text on the web page to be centered, and then color white makes every text on the web page to be not just on the web page, inside this content class. So if you remember in our HTML stuff, we wrapped everything inside this um, inside this div that has a class of content. So finally we have the button selector. So this time around I'm just targeting the button class, the button tag. That is why I didn't put the hashtag or the full stop to actually select the class. So this we just target all button tags that we have in our HTML, and basically we just have just 3 button tags. So just doing the text decoration none to remove any default text decoration that comes with a button. Color white to change the color to white, the text color to white. Background color orange just to change the background color of the button. Border 1px solid white. Padding 10px top and bottom, 30px left and right. border radius 5 ps just to give it a little bit of curve, and the font weight for the text, I'm giving it 700. Finally, I want to style our minutes, seconds, and tens HTML. So since I just gave them only IDs, I didn't give them class, what I can do is to just use the hashtag, which is how we select IDs with CSS. If you remember, I said your class selectors, you make use of dot, and when you want to select IDs, you make use of hashtag. So I'm selecting minutes, I'm selecting seconds, and I'm selecting times, separated with the comma, so that your CSS code will know that you are selecting multiple IDs. So this time around, I'm setting the font size to 2 rem. And what rem actually means, I guess this is the first time I'm using it for you guys. What rem means is like the default sizing that your browser gives to your HTML elements. For example, the default sizing it gives to a p tag is 16. So if I'm saying 2 rem, it's going to be 2 times 16, which will become 32. Then finally, I gave this a font weight of 700. Then the last thing that we have on our CSS is the buttons. So dot buttons is just basically this div that I have here that I used to make it. I just gave it a display of grid column gap of 500 pixels, which is like a gap between each of the buttons. If you look at the final design, we have a gap here and we have a gap here. And finally, we have the grid template columns, which I set the size of each of the column to be auto, meaning that it should take up a maximum size for it. So that's finally with the CSS. And the last file that we have to look at is our JavaScript. So the first 3 lines of code that I have here is to initialize the variables that we're using to check the current value of our tens, our seconds, and our minutes. Then after that, I actually got the node of each of the HTML tags that we are going to be working with. So this tens node is actually getting the ID of the tens tag, of the tens span that I have. If you look at our index here, we have these tens here for this guy. So this gets this particular tag. So we can work with it. The same thing for the second node, it gets the second tag, it gets the minutes tag. Then we have the buttons too. Just a reference to our buttons. That's the start button, the stop button, and the reset button. Now, to continue with this stopwatch, we are going to be making use of 2 JavaScript inbuilt methods, which is the clearInterval and the setInterval. Now, if you can remember when I explained this setInterval for you guys before, I told you that in JavaScript we have 2 measure methods that we use to do some timing events in JavaScript. Then we have the set timeout, which is a method that actually runs a code just once after a time has been given to it. And we have the set interval, which is used to run a code repeatedly between each time. So for example, if I want to run a code every 5 seconds, I will make use of the set interval. And this time around, I want to run this code every 10 milliseconds. Now, the set interval takes up 2 major properties. The first property it takes is a callback function. I'll come back to what a callback function is. Then the second property it takes is the timer, which is measured in milliseconds. So conversion of milliseconds to seconds is a second is equal to 1000 milliseconds. And since we are working with tens, and tens reach from 1 to 100, I have to put in 10 here, so that when this is running in 10 milliseconds, I'm sure of it's running between, it will count between 1 to 100 before it gets to 100. Now, why did I call this a callback function? Because it's a function that is being called by another function. So the function we are calling here is setInterval, and setInterval is actually calling another function here, which we created at the end of the file. So that is why this is called a callback function. So it's just like a function that actually calls another function or takes up another function as a parameter. So anytime you get to hear about callback functions, just know this is what they actually mean. It's just that it's another function that you can pass into another function. Then I have this variable called I created here, which is interval. Now, why I created this variable interval is because of this. I don't want my since this set interval is something that runs every time, as in let's say every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds, or any the time that you give to it. There should be a time that we want to stop this. And what we are building is a stopwatch. There should be a way for us to stop it, and there should be a way for us to reset it. So creating a variable interval and not assigning a value to it yet is what I did. And then what I will do is to now assign this set interval that we created here to the variable so that we can have a reference to this interval that is being created, so that we can now clear or stop this interval anytime we are done with it. As you can see, I did start button dot on click. So this on click is how you can handle events from JavaScript. I know subsequently I'll be showing you guys the onClick method in the HTML file, but if you don't want to put it in your HTML tag as part of the attributes, you can also do that with JavaScript by just calling the node of the HTML element that you have already had a reference to, and then dot onClick. So now I'm assigning a function to it. Now, this function I am actually assigning to it is known as an arrow function. So I can actually do this like this, or let me just do the normal one that we know, which is the start button dot on click. Then inside it, this is okay. So this is not working because we are trying to use making use of the latest JavaScript version. So let's go back to the exe version. So let me explain this arrow function. So this is what we call exe function. Normally we create functions by making use of the keyword function, then the name of the function and parameters, then our curly braces. But exe now made it possible for us to actually assign functions to a variable. So the variable we are assigning this function to is this onClick. So you use when you want to make use of exes, you call the variable name, which is the start button dot onClick, equal to, you start with parentheses, then an arrow function. So this arrow must be there. You can't do without the arrow. If you don't put the arrow, your code will throw an error. Then inside the curly braces, you can now write what you want that function to do. So the first thing we are doing is to clear the interval. And why am I clearing this interval? To make sure that my interval stops before I set a new interval again, so that this time around it won't like do many intervals at the same time. We have to stop a particular interval and before we can now continue it again. So that's the start button. Finally, we have the stop button dot on click, and for the stop button, all we are doing is to just clear the interval. So this is basically just removing it from our memory, and it stops running. So the interval stops running. Then the reset button dot on click clears our interval, sets the variables that we declared before back to 0 if they have been incremented before, seconds to 0, minutes to 0, and also sets our tense node, which is the tense HTML node, the seconds node, the minutes node, to the default 0, 0, 0. Finally, the function I want to explain is the start timer that we pass to our set interval when we want to start running this stopwatch. So the first thing this function does is to start incrementing our tens by 1. So when it increments, let's say, okay, by default, when this starts, our tens is 0. So when it runs for the first time, our tens is incremented to 1. Now, I'm checking for if tens is less than 10. So this meaning that tens is between 0 and 9. So when it's 0 and 9, I don't just want to show 9 on the browser. I want to show both 0 and that value 9. That is why I have this tens.innerHTML equal to the 0 that I'm appending at the beginning plus the value of our tens, which could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now, else meaning that it has now reached that double digit which is 10 and above. So we don't really need to append the 0 again. So all I have to just do is to set this to 10. Now, this function has been running and our tens gets to 100, which is now is up to a second. So when it's up to a second, the first thing I want to do is to reset back my tens to 0, increment my seconds by 1, and then set my tens node back to 0 again. Because on the UI, what you'll be seeing is 100. So I'll set it back to 0. Then finally, also check for the seconds. If seconds is less than 10, just like I explained for the tens, it checks for that and makes use of that. Then we are now checking for when seconds is equal to 60. It's now time for us to increment our minutes and reset back our seconds to 0. So if our minutes is now less than 10, we are also appending the 0 to it, and else we are just showing the value of the minutes. So just to show you guys how this works, we click on our start, and if you look at this first figure, it's running from 0 to 100. So when it gets to 100, it increments our seconds number by 1. So our seconds keeps on increasing when this guy gets to 100. So let's wait for this when our seconds will reach 59. So once it reaches 59, we get to see our minute counter increment by 1, which is now the 1 minute time we have. So let's just wait for that. Okay, so as you can see, the seconds has reached actually 59. Now incremented our minutes by 1, and it's reset back to 0, and it starts counting from 0 again. So say the stop button stops our stuff, the start continues it if you do not reset it, while the reset stops everything and resets your number. So that's it for this particular stopwatch application. Now, the second application that we have to look at is the digital watch. So for the digital watch, let me just open up a new window and show you guys the digital watch application. So this time around is just a digital clock that actually gets your device time and now works with your device time. So the HTML document is just as simple. I think this is simpler than the one for the stopwatch application. So basically, we still have our link into our CSS file. You have our link into our JavaScript file, and we just have one div. And what this div has is the ID and a class click clock. And finally, we have this attribute on load. So what does onload do? Onload is an attribute that triggers whenever that particular element has been loaded on your browser. So once this div has been completed, has loaded on our browser, it now runs this function that we have in our JavaScript file. So before I show the JavaScript file, let's just look at the CSS. Basically, the background is black. The clock, I'm just setting the text align center with 0, margin 40 pixels for top and bottom, left and right auto. The color, that's the text color of our clock, is just going to look like this. The font size is 60px. The font family is Obitron. So for this font family, I don't have this Obitron on my system. I don't think. Do I have it? Let's see. Okay, no, I don't have it. So I guess I'll just do a quick. Let's go to Google Fonts so that we can see how we can add any fonts that you want to use. Actually, I saw this Obitron online and it was cool. It was cool. So let me just add that guy. So let's see, Obitron Yoa. So this is the font that I want to use, and let's see, Google Fonts CDN. So actually what I need is the Google Fonts CDN link, because I don't want to download these fonts to my system and start linking the physical file. I just want to work with the online font directly, which means I can come to my index, link this guy, and change this guy to Obitron, which is this viewer. So if I save, I guess my page is going to yeah, so you can see how cool the phone looks like. Wow, it just looks like a timer stuff and all that. That's cool. So this is basically the timer application um, that I'm just explaining now. So I guess that's it for the CSS, just letter spacing. Letter spacing is like the spacing between each letter on your text. That's all. So finally, we just have also a very short JavaScript file. Actually, this JavaScript file is too short, guess, but it's fine. So it starts with the function showtime, and the first thing that we are doing is to declare a variable date, and we are setting it to new date. So this new date actually gets the date of your system, of your current time that is on your system, and from it we can get the hours. So I'm creating a variable hour to get hours from it. So this guy will return from 0 to 23. It returns in the 24-hour time format. Minutes returns from 0 to 59, we know that, and seconds returns 0 to 59. And then session, for the session is just for us to know when it is AM and PM. So the first if statement that we have here is to check if our hour is equal to 0. We know that when hour is equal to 0, since we want to do a 12-hour format system, it's definitely going to be 12. Whether 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. is still 12 on the 12-hour timer. We don't have anything like 0 in the time stuff. So we set our hour directly to 12 here. So that's what we are checking at this first time. Now, if hour is greater than 12, meaning that the hour that we have here is from 13 to 23. So we now have a time that is higher than the 12-hour format time that we have. So what we are doing here is to reassign hour minus 12. So for example, if hour is 13, 13 minus 12 is 1, and we know that 13 is 1. 14 minus 12 is 2, and we know that 14 is 2. 18 minus 12 is 6, and we know that 18 is 6. So that's it. And then we know that anytime time is greater than 12, we know it's afternoon. Anytime the hour time is greater than 12, it's afternoon. So we are setting our section to PM. So this just has a little bit of shorthand if statement. So for the benefit of doubt, I am going to convert this guy to the normal if statement that we have, so that I don't confuse some of us here. So what this guy is doing is to state a normal if statement. If hour is less than 10, I want to set my hour equal to this guy, else my hour is going to be equal to hour. So I think this is plus hour, sorry, I have plus hour here. So that's basically this first one. So I'll just copy this guy, duplicate it, and let's do for the minutes. And also let's do for the seconds. So I will comment these guys out since it's the same thing that he's doing. You guys can look at it later if you feel like you want to understand how this shorthand stuff is still doing the same thing as this. So I will explain. What we are doing here is to now check whether the hour time is less than 10, like we did for the stopwatch stuff where I told you reading between 1 and 9. So because we want to append 0 at the beginning, that's what we are doing here. But if it is greater than 10, if it is from 10 and above, just work with hour. The same thing for the minutes, the same thing for the seconds. So for our time, we are now getting the hour, plus colon plus minutes plus colon plus seconds plus a space before the session. So this is what we call another way for us to manipulate with strings. So this guy will give us something that looks like this. Maybe let's say we are working with 01 30 space PM, where the 01 is the hour, then the colon is this first colon that you are seeing. The next one that you are seeing is the minutes. So we also have extra colon here too for the second colon. And the next one that we are having is the seconds. Then the space, just add a space here. Then we have the session, which is either AM or PM. Finally, we are doing document to get element by ID my clock display. If you remember, we have this ID set for my div as my clock display, and we are setting the inner text to text. Then we are doing set timeout. Set timeout is okay. So they made use of set timeout here actually. So this is what. Let me not confuse you guys. Let me go confuse you guys. Let's do set interval, please. Huh? Set interval. Awesome. So with the set interval, we have this. So I'll remove this guy. Okay, wait, let me leave the guy. Or okay, I'll remove this guy. And let's see. Yeah, this still works. So since we have seen the set interval, let's work with that. Why I removed the other one was I was going to explain some advanced coding stuff, which is not what you should know for now. Let's get the basics. Then after the basics, you can get to look at some of this advanced stuff. But what, just to give you guys a hint of what was happening there, is what we call recursion, a function calling itself. So as time goes on, I'll explain what recursion means and all that. So I think that's it for these two stuff. Then finally, projects that we are going to work on tomorrow, or I'll get to explain to you guys tomorrow, is the project that I've been looking at too, which is this analog clock application. So I'll just show you guys how the analog application works, and tomorrow we get to explain everything on it. But for today, let's just work with what I've shown you guys. So for the analog clock application, this is how this looks like. So it's just a very simple stuff that looks sharp and cool. So this is the analog application and it's looking cool, and that. I believe tomorrow we get to look at that and get to build something like this. So if you guys have any question, anything that you want me to explain for you guys, you can always reach out to me. I will get to answer it. But I guess this is us saying okay, that's it for today. During the meeting, also get to explain some things and all that. All right, guys, take care, guys. Good night. I'm really tired now, so yeah, good night. Let me start the video here.